Have you ever wanted to have a tea party by moonlight while eating the most enchanting fairy-made pastries? Well, me too, but alas, I haven't had the opportunity just yet, so I decided to combine the dreamy idea with one of my newest obsession, making tiny pastries and cakes out of polymer clay. It definitely wasn't without its challenges, but seeing the beautiful result in the end made every second of struggling completely worth it. Hey everyone, I'm Shugi, the artist behind Novyra Jewelry and Clay Art, and today we are going to be making a fantasy miniature menu using Sculpey Premium Polymer Clay. So grab yourself a little snack, get cozy, and let's get started. In my last video, I made my very first miniature cake, which was a Japanese strawberry shortcake, and I was actually really happy with how it turned out. If you haven't seen that video yet, you can check it out right now on screen or find the link in the description. But anyway, as much as I loved making it, I felt like it wasn't quite unique enough. So many people make incredibly realistic miniature pastries, and I'm still quite far from reaching that level of realism. So instead, I thought, why not start adding my own little twist? I decided I want to make miniature fantasy whimsical cottagecore inspired menus filled with all sorts of magical little treats. And in today's video, I'm making one of my very first prototypes. I call it the prototype because these probably won't be the 100% finalized versions. I'm still experimenting and figuring out exactly how I want these little menus to look. I also want to make a bigger celestial cake to go along with the cake roll I'm making today, but this video is already quite long as it is. So if you would like to see me make one in the future, definitely let me know in the comments. I also have so many other fantasy menus in mind with more witchy and fairycore inspired themes, so I'm really excited to explore those ideas too. But for today, I'm making a little moonlit bakery themed menu. I imagine it as a tiny charcuterie style board filled with whimsical celestial treats including meringue, blueberry cake roll, star-shaped macarons, forest fruit jam-filled cookies, little forest fruits, and of course, some sparkling stardrops. In the meantime, I almost finished making my little wooden cutting board. I am not very good at making wooden textures, mostly because I've only tried it like once. So if you have any tips and tricks, please leave it down in the comments because I followed many tutorials and they always end up looking very cartoonish. After I finished the cutting board, I put it in the oven and baked it according to the packaging. I moved on to making the little cake roll. For this video, I decided to go with a blueberry jam filling because I think it will fit the celestial theme perfectly. While rolling it up, you really have to take your time because this is the most crucial part. If you mess this up, it can look very ugly, and when you cut into it, it won't have a nice pattern. As you can see, I made the jam filling the equal size, which was a mistake. I should have cut it a bit shorter, and now the jam filling hangs out a little. So I decided to cover it with a thin layer of orange. It also adds that very well baked feeling to it. Also, don't forget to add texture using a toothbrush. To give my little cake roll a more realistic look, I shaved off a little soft pastel and decided to rub it onto it. Now it actually looks like it was baked. Now for one of my favorite parts, cutting into it. It's just so satisfying. I could do this all day. As it looked quite flat, it was time to bring out the needle tool to give that very nice spongy cake look. Earlier you could see me start preparing the icing and now it was time to try mixing it a little. It took very long so I had to speed it up. It was still a very bad consistency so I had to put it aside. Now time for one of the most tiring parts, but they will all be worth it at the end because they really elevate the final look. The little decorations like blueberries, leaves, strawberries and meringues. The little strawberries I actually made during my last video, I just made way too many of them but they came in handy. And my cutting board was finally out of the oven. I do feel like it turned out a bit too dark but most of it is going to be covered anyway. And then I moved on to mixing the colors for the small star-shaped macarons. I wanted the top and bottom to be very nice and bubbly, so I covered it with a piece of plastic bag and they turned out amazingly. However, I did press them a little too hard so I had to redo them a few times because they also kept sticking to the cutting mat. One of the macarons is going to have strawberry fillings, while the other one just a nice buttercream filling. For the macaron top and bottom, you have to add a small little thin layer because you will have to work it similarly how you make the bread texture. But if you start working the macaron top itself, then it's going to look very bad and you will ruin the cream inside. Trust me, I know because I tried. You could also make your life easier, making the filling ever so slightly smaller than the top and bottom halves. It's going to be so much easier to close and work with later on. Making all of these tiny pastries really makes me hungry for them. I didn't want to make boring white meringue, so I decided to mix pastel pink and purple colors to give them the celestial look. Originally, I wanted to hand sculpt the croissant and I would cut out a big triangular shape for it. However, the triangle cutter I had was way too big and I decided it would be so much easier just to use my already existing mold, which is the perfect crescent moon shape, that I just went ahead and did that. In the future, I do want to make some of my own molds, for example, for small cutlery. So if you have any tips on making your own molds, I would be very happy to hear them, or just tell me about a video I should watch. For the jam-filled cookies, I also used molds. I just love how adorable they are and they are always perfect. And I decided to make an apricot jam one and a blueberry jam. When I get to the varnishing part, I will only varnish the jam filling so it will look extra shiny. Of course, we can't leave our little croissants and cookies unbaked, so we have to use some powdered pesto to make them look more realistic. My macarons already looked very good, but I felt like they weren't magical or celestial enough, so I dusted them with a bit of pink and purple pastel, and then later on when they are baked, I will add some silver and gold stars to them so they will look truly magical. On the same line of thought, my croissants definitely could use a bit more uniqueness, so I decided to make some small crescent moons and silver dots and just decorate it with it. I still wasn't quite happy with it, so I will just have to decorate it after it's baked. And now for the moment of truth. Did my icing turn out better than last time? And sadly, it turned out even worse. It just stayed sticky and I just couldn't spread it nicely. I tried watering it down with liquid clay and more clay softener. It just turned it unhandleable. But in the end, I managed to spread it out decently, which I'm quite happy about. But next time I will have to experiment with another way of making icing, because this is unsustainable. But at least after all the suffering, it was time for a good part, decorating the little cake roll. To tell you the truth, I never actually really ate a cake rolls filled with jam, but I think it's an interesting idea and I will definitely try making one in real life. Originally, I thought icing the cake roll was difficult, but then I had to ice the small cake roll slice. That was 10 times worse. It was so small and thin, and the icing just kept getting everywhere. Luckily, we will only see one side of this cake roll, so it won't matter how the other side looks. That means I could focus on making one side as presentable as possible. It didn't feel right that for a fairy themed charcuterie board, it just didn't have any flowers. I tried sculpting one by adding each and singular petal one by one, but that was a disaster and I also forgot to film it, so instead I used one of my molds I've never actually used before because it was quite difficult. You had to press it in quite deeply and it always turned out badly, but today for the first time it actually turned out amazingly. I'm so happy I tried using it. And later you will be able to see that how much it actually elevates the final piece. Now with the last decoration done, it was time for them to bake. After removing them from the oven and letting them cool, it was time to do the final decorations. For the macarons, I went with the theme of the night sky, so I started drawing on little symbolic stars and constellations, also little moons, and I think they turned out so adorable, and I also want to eat them very badly. But as it's made out of clay, we should never listen to our intrusive thoughts. For the meringues, I didn't want to overdo it, so I just decided to color a few of them with gold and silver markers. And I'm so happy I decided to start coloring them with these silver and gold colored Posca markers, because that meant I could color the croissant as well. And coloring the silver clay with silver marker was probably the best decision. It just elevated it so much and it sparkled 10 times more. I also did a few sparkly dots on the croissant that turned it 100% more celestial. It also didn't quite feel right that I was calling this a little magical menu, but it didn't actually have a menu, so I decided to cut a piece of paper and just write down all the little foods and trees that are on my charcuterie board. And finally, the final step, glazing. I use this pentart pouring glaze because I just like how simple it is to use, and it just gives it the best shine and also has a slight doming effect with just one layer. It took a while and a lot of effort to actually assemble this final piece, because I decided I am not going to use glue and just use the glaze as the glue. And that meant it was quite hard to attach the pieces, as it takes a while for the glaze to dry, so everything just kept sliding around, but eventually I managed it. I decided for the cake roll I'm not going to varnish the bread part because that would look not very realistic, so I just covered the jam filling, and I did the same with the cookies as well. And for the absolute final detail, I decided to add some shiny balls that are kinda like star drops. Luckily I had both gold and silver, so there's a bit of variety in it. And now for the final reveal. What do you think? Would a little fairy make something like this? To tell you the truth, it turned out so much better than I expected, and honestly so happy how everything came together. And I can't wait to make even more tiny food and magical little treats. If you have any ideas or recommendation for what I should make next, definitely leave it in the comments. I would love to hear your suggestions. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. And please feel free to check out my online store as well. It's linked in the description or you can find it in my bio. I'm planning a little rebrand soon, and when that happens I will also be adding my miniature food creations to my shop. So definitely stay tuned for that. Have a lovely rest of your day and I will see you in the next video. Bye!